Welcome to Wager Talk Final Four version. Scott Spreitzer here with Marco D'Angelo and Dave Cokin, Mark Seidel at the controls. And we got a lot to talk about today, guys. Of course, the Final Four, which we're going to jump into now. We'll also have best bets at the end of the show. And we're going to hear from our good friend Aaron Bruski. He's actually at the Pacers-Sacramento Kings game as we speak, but he's going to take a little time tell us his thoughts on the adjusted prices, for instance, on the Golden State Warriors and what's going on in the East. The latest news on Joel Embiid with the Sixers is that he's going to be out for at least 2 to 4 weeks, orbital fracture with his eye and a concussion. We'll talk about what that means to the Sixers, along with some other teams that are in contention in both conferences. But first, guys, we do want to talk about the big Final Four matchups that take place on Saturday. We're going to talk about the Loyola Chicago-Michigan game first, where Michigan is about a 5-point favorite in that one. And Dave, I got to tell you right out of the blocks that you couldn't ask, I think, right now for a more interesting coaching matchup because you've got the young buck and Porter Moser, so to speak, who's pulling all the right strings, making all the right moves with this team to get where they are. They've been undervalued, underrated all season long. We thought they were seeded a little bit less than they should have been. And then, of course, the KG veteran in John Beilein, who's had a week basically to prep for what he's going to see from this Loyola Chicago team at both ends of the floor.
Well, look, the keys are, to me, they're simple. Obviously, it's more complicated than this, but you have to zero in on keys. For Michigan, exploit the height advantage. They are a much bigger basketball team than Loyola, and they need to go out there, extend the defense, get in their face on shots, and not worry about Loyola. You know, I give Loyola full credit. They've done an amazing job in terms of getting in position to get rebounds and stuff like that. I don't think Michigan can concern themselves with that. They have to rely on the fact that they're bigger to be able to control the glass and get out there and contest every shot. Because if you give this Loyola team open looks, they're going to knock them down. Mm-hmm. This team can flat out shoot. And one thing to remember on Loyola, it's very important to me, and I know I've said this a few times on our daily show. I've probably said it 20 times in the past couple of weeks. Loyola was, I'm not going to say wildly underseeded. It's not like they should have been a 4 or a 5.
Right.
But they should have been a 7 or an 8, not an 11. So the Cinderella stuff is a little bit out of line. Maybe now they're a Cinderella because they're a true 7 or an 8
they're
in
with
a
the
Final
Blue Bloods,
Four.
so to speak.
Right.
Know?
But up until this point, there has been nothing shocking whatsoever about what Loyola's done, and all you have to do is look at the point spreads in the games they were involved in. Mm-hmm. There haven't been any big upsets here. They were in position to win all these games. The interesting thing here is that the public is now lock, stock, and barrel on the Ramblers. They are playing Loyola in this game.
I think it depends on where you play, though.
Well, it's going to
talking about home,
yes.
It was basically even.
It's going to vary from house to house, and that's
right.
why you have to be very careful about
Sure.
looking at these percentages that you see online and saying, "Oh, look, they're getting 70% of the action." Well, they're not really getting 70. They might be at some books,
right.
but they're not overall. But they are getting on ticket counts, and I average them out among all the sources
Sure.
I've got, which includes some accounts that are not legal. Okay. I'm talking about
offshore accounts.
No, not offshores. You can get the. I'm talking about stateside undergrounds, if you want to call them that are big books, and they're still, the biggest books in the country is still in New York. In fact, the biggest books in the world are still in New York. And my best contact back there tells me it's about 60% on Loyola, on tickets, on money, pretty close to even. So it's not going to be a pros versus Joes game to any extent. I think you have to break this one down. And what I told you is what I think each team needs to do to win. I'm not going to tell you who I think is going to win and cover, because that's going to be my 5% play at WagerTalk, and I've had a nice run on those in the NCAA tournament, and this will be the last one for this season.
I like getting what's going on out of state, out of country, here in town in Las Vegas, talking to Matt Holt on Thursday afternoon, even as far as the public is concerned, pretty much, between Loyola Chicago and Michigan. Sharps, 3.5 to 1, Loyola Chicago. As far as the money's concerned in this one. They were at 5. Most books were at 5.5 on Thursday afternoon. They've been as high as 6 in a couple of spots talking about Michigan. They happen to lower theirs to 5. And also, Marco, the total, Matt was kind of telling us earlier today on ESPN Las Vegas that whenever they would get a little bit of over money, they were getting hit pretty big back with under money. And he said they took, I believe it was 3 $2,500 bets on the under in the last couple of days in that particular game.
Yeah, you look at this one, and for me, if you look at what Loyola's done, and you can't fault anything, and as you said, they've shot the lights out of the basketball, which they've done all year.
Yes, they have.
This is the number 3 team in the country in field goal percentage, number 17 in three-point shots. So, I mean, they know how to score. In the last 3 games against Tennessee, Nevada, and Kansas State, they shot 50, 55, and 57%. And they're getting better each game. Now, they happened to catch Kansas State, I thought, in the perfect spot. I know they were playing to go to the Final Four, but Kansas State just stole a game from Kentucky. The game before.
Kentucky melted down under the layups, missed free throws, the whole thing.
It was great, and they got him at the right spot. And I'll tell you what, that game wouldn't even have been as close as it was if it wouldn't have been for all of the turnovers that Loyola had in that game.
Sure.
That's one thing that they got to clean up if Loyola's going to beat this Michigan team, is they've had 31 turnovers in the last 2 games. They were able to get by with it against Kansas State. It almost cost them in the Nevada game.
Sure.
That one came right down to the wire, which all of their games have. But if you look at how they've played the game so far, every team that they've matched up was happy to play a half-court game with them.
Right.
I don't see Michigan playing a half-court game. If I'm playing a faster tempo. I've got better athletes overall. I want to have more possessions in the game and let that talent get me the separation that it needs. Now, the one problem you have with Michigan, if you're betting Michigan, and we all know it, when it gets late in the game, if you're up 7 or 8 and they start fouling, you've got to hold your breath. This is not a good foul-shooting team. And
that's why Leonard Hamilton didn't foul in the final 11 seconds. He couldn't hold his breath any longer.
Yeah, that's for sure.
66% for the season. That is not good.
Yeah, that's a concern you have to have. But I really do think Michigan, this is one of those ones I think we talked about correlated parlays on how the games are going to go. We talked about that with the Kansas State-Kentucky game last week. This is another one. If Loyola's going to win this game, if you really like them, I think you got to like the under. If you like Michigan, I think you got to like the over, and I do think that they're going to go at a faster pace here.
And that's also, like CGT is kind of in line with exactly what you're saying. To your point, the sharps are on 3.5 to 1 on Loyola, and they keep getting decent sized bets on the under in that particular game. I keep looking at an X factor being, on defense, Xavier Simpson for Michigan, because he's such a great deep perimeter defender. Yep. Now, there's only one of them, and you've got a few guys, at least 3 for Loyola Chicago, who can hit those deep threes. But I think you got to put Simpson as much as possible on the defensive end on Clayton Custer, because if he hits 45% like he's done all year, basically, you're in trouble. Then all of a sudden you start getting other guys who start finding themselves getting open in that 12 to 15-foot range for Loyola Chicago. Things change a little bit. Just don't turn it over. I mean, that's what you got to do. It sounds simple. It's not if you're Loyola Chicago. The other game is Kansas taking on Villanova, where Villanova's a 5-point favorite. And as we heard from Matt Holt earlier Thursday afternoon, the pros, 91% of the money on Kansas at CGT Books, over 2 times more public money on Villanova minus the points. And I'll say this much, though, as Dave and I have been saying for a long time on the Las Vegas Sports Line, don't get too caught up on who the pros are and who the Joes are. The pros were all over the Cleveland Browns quite a bit the last couple of years.
They haven't exactly torn it up in this tournament either.
Exactly.
In fact, in any of the tournaments, because if you go back to Tuesday night, sharp money all over Western Kentucky. Loser.
Yep.
I mean, it's just,
my money was on Western Kentucky.
So was mine, but it wasn't because I actually.
So was mine.
I got to tell you,
it's a clean sweep, Marcus.
This is it's one of those things. I mean, I know I should be happy about the fact that I had the game at Pick'em,
right?
And it went to 2.5, but it's like I'm sitting there going, I'm dead.
It's funny with that one real quickly.
I'm dead because this closing line value, is the biggest crock of all time.
Oh my gosh, tell me about it. Tell me. I mean,
it just is. It just is. I mean, my closing line value last year in baseball was absolutely astonishing. It was that good. I had the worst season I've had in years. Okay.
Yeah.
So
there's 3 guys sitting in the studio right now who probably beat the closing line 93% of the time that they have games that they're betting on. That doesn't mean anything. As we've seen again.
No, well, you know what it means? It means that you're
getting the best value.
You're good at judging where the line's going to go.
Where the bets are going to come in. But to call somebody like that's the key factor in okay, well, you're 42% against the spread, but hey, you're beating the line value 90% of the time, so you're a heck of a handicapper. No, it all comes down to the bottom line because we're all going to beat the closing line generally almost every single day.
Bottom line, I'll take a bad number and a winning ticket over a good number and a losing ticket. I know that sounds square,
but I'm with
you. I'm sorry. You got to look at the bottom line.
In the long run, we're going to beat the spread by having the better of the number. But I agree with you totally, Marco.
It's funny, and we're digressing here for a moment, but I think it's worth talking about.
Sure.
is because the marketplace is expanding exponentially in sports wagering, and it's going to just blow up when it becomes legal. The sophistication level is also expanding. But just because you hear, and listen, the arguments that are made, they make sense, but that's not how it works out in the world of real betting. Okay? The bottom line is you still have to handicap the games, and you come up with your conclusions and don't worry about what other people are betting.
Right.
And you're going to do a lot better in the long run. And by the way, you won't give yourself an ulcer either.
That's true.
I'll throw it to both of you guys because I know you both have been there, and I've been there too many times. I handicap my games at night, but most of the time I don't post till the next morning. How many times have I circled a game at night and the line's at 1, and I wake up in the morning and the line's at 2, and I take the game off the card because I lost a point of value, and then you watch that game roll home.
Sometimes it works out. I'm not going to. Listen. I looked at a game on Major League Baseball opening day. I had considered under 7 minus 110 with the Cardinals Mets, and it shot. I mean, the game went nuts. I think it closed at under 6.5. Yeah. And under 7 was minus like 135.
Right.
By late last night. Well, I wouldn't play it because I'm not going to lay minus 135. So in this case, it saved me money because all that sharp money came in on the Cardinals Mets under, and the game went over in batting practice. Okay,
as they were getting off the bus and tying their cleats. There's one sport that I like to do my stuff the night before. Dave does his stuff the night before. Like to get my action the night before and post plays a lot of times 2-3 o'clock Pacific time in the morning. The one sport that I seem to be able to do better at when it comes to wins and losses, if I wait until 11 a.m., maybe 12 noon Pacific time, is the NBA. Mm-hmm. If I just give myself a little bit more time to see where the lines go, that's when I see it. But everything else for me is like early as possible.
But there's a sport where I have to wait.
I know what you're going to say,
the NHL.
Yep, exactly.
I want goalies confirmed.
Yep.
So if it means I get a worse number, so be it. I've got to have the goalies I want in there, or I'm not making the play.
And there will be no goalies in the Kansas-Villanova game.
No, I don't think so.
So anyway, as we mentioned, the pros, according to CGT books, on Kansas heavily. The Joes on Nova, a little bit more than 2-1. What would you say are the key factors in both of these teams winning this particular game, whether they cover the spread or not? That would be, of course, Villanova if they win. Kansas, boy, I just keep thinking if they can get if Azubuike stays out of foul trouble.
That's a big if.
That's a big key to this game, obviously.
I got to ask both of you guys, to me, have you seen a number 1 seed, and I'm talking about Kansas, that as far as the bookmakers go, have not been respected like a number 1 seed? I mean, last week against Duke, they're the number 1 seed, and they were a 3-point underdog. And a lot of times we talk about when it's Vegas versus somebody that doesn't bet, and that would be the committee, you setting things up and making the seeds, that usually Vegas is the sharper.
Right.
That's where you're going to lean. We see it in, the college bowl games when a team that's ranked higher is, not the favorite, and so forth. But, that bit me on Sunday because I was on Duke, and I'll admit it. And I like Duke. I thought that their zone would slow this Kansas team down. And the only way that you're going to beat...
It did.
But they shot over the zone. They had 13 threes. That's the way you beat a
zone.
But
it's not like Kansas had a fantastic offensive game. And look, if Grayson Allen's shot doesn't hit 90% of the rim and then fall off, Duke wins.
Or the guy before that, when they were up 3, misses a 7-footer. I forget who it was, but it was a little... just a little shot that he's made 1,000 times.
Pissed me off.
Yeah.
Because I had the under for a 5%. I've had a great run with my 5%, but I had the under in that game. And the funny thing is, in the analysis, the last line I wrote, and if this was on WagerTalk, the last line I wrote was anything but overtime.
So you did it to yourself. Yeah. You did it to yourself. Way to go.
No, I was that convinced that the game was an under, and it was way under for 40.
But you had to throw that in there.
Yeah, I know. Huh?
And I know I could see you typing it up, and then maybe I shouldn't type that up. Oh, well, it sounds good. I'm throwing that.
But I was convinced the only way I'm going to lose this game is if there's an extra 5 minutes.
Yep.
And
you were right.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Dave. You were right, buddy.
And you know what I got for that?
About that?
You know what I got for that?
Yeah.
Nothing.
You got something,
I
but
got
it's
so
so
damn
good.
right. You were wrong.
Yeah.
But you look at this one, and you have two number one seeds, and you're looking at the number that's the same as a 3 seed versus an 11 seed. Now, granted, we said that the seeding's wrong there, but Michigan's where there should be. Michigan's seeded, right? And even if it was a 3 versus if it was a 3 versus a 7 and a 1 versus a 1 and the number's the same, it seems odd to me. It's just like Kansas is not getting the respect here. And
I'll play the devil's advocate here. The game power rates, at least on my power ratings, it power rates to where the number is. They can't. That's the truth. The true deal in terms of making the number in the game. And it doesn't matter what the seeds are. It's not disrespect. The power rating does say that Villanova is supposed to be favored in the game. And
you've got Villanova that has played, ironically, 2 Big 12 teams already in the tournament. They handled both of them easily, beating West Virginia. And
they did play well offensively against Texas Tech.
And that game, listen, that was a 5-point game with like 4 minutes to go in the game. And it can go either way at that point. They didn't play well in that game. Fortunately for them, Texas Tech shot the ball even worse than Villanova did. It was an ugly Elite Eight game.
Yeah.
Which Villanova happened to win. And fortunately for me, they won and covered.
But they go 4 for 24 from area code 3 in that game against
Tech.
And
those were open looks.
Yeah, so you kind of give credit that they were able to win a game while playing poorly on offense, but at the same time, and I've talked about this week on our radio show, is that Texas Tech is, I always call them isomania. Yeah. Chris Beard is all about isolations. You think that's not easy? Well, relatively speaking, easy for the extremely well-coached Villanova Wildcats to defend isolation after isolation constantly.
And they killed them.
And they did. And that's because they're a great team with a great coach. But it's hard to judge, for me at least. It's hard for me to judge how well they're going to play against a team like Kansas based off of what they did against Texas Tech.
Kansas is fast.
They are.
They can get into transition in a hurry, which Texas Tech doesn't do. They're not a transition type team.
Yeah, they just get that ball down there and run those ISOs.
If Villanova shoots the ball anywhere close to where they did last Sunday, they're in trouble in this game because Kansas will take those rebounds and they'll be down the court lickety-split.
Does it bother? No, they had a whole week in between, so it's different than coming back from the Thursday to a Saturday game. But you look at Kansas, and they rely so much on Devontae Graham. This is a guy, if you look at the minutes he's logged, for the season, for the entire season, he's averaged 37.8 minutes per game. During the tournament, he's virtually not come off the floor.
Right.
He played all 45 minutes Sunday against Duke, and then the big guy gets in foul trouble. I mean, everything was going against that team on Sunday, and they found a way to win. But I just don't like when you got to rely so much.
I don't even, and I'm not totally not dismissing your point. I just don't even handicap it because he's 20 years old.
Unless he gets in foul trouble, he's going to be out there the whole game.
He's 20 years old. He's used to it. But that doesn't mean that you're not right. I'm not saying you're not right.
You get more timeouts in these bigger games.
You do.
For TV, so you got more rest. But, boy, I just –
and again, it's one. It hasn't hurt him thus far.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to handicap it to figure out and to hope that it hurts. You know what I mean? It's tough. I get what you're saying, but it's tough. That's like something I don't even want to factor in right now because there's so many other things to factor in. But the point
is, if when you rely that much on one guy, if something happens to him that that he's. If he picks up 2 fouls,
well, we're talking about foul trouble without Zabuka. He's the same way.
Same thing. I mean, if Brunson gets 2 fouls, I mean, he doesn't play as many minutes, but I mean,
I don't think if Graham
comes off the floor and Villanova's not the same team.
If he's ineffective or has a bad game, I think it's because of something Villanova did more than it is that he's played a lot of minutes this year. I totally understanding your point, but for me, that's taken it in a direction where I'm guessing to me. And I don't want to have to do that much, to wonder if that. I just don't think it does. But, we've seen teams like 6 players deep that have gone the distance of the tournament, 6 games in a couple of weeks. I'll never forget that 6 overtime game between Syracuse and was it UConn in the Big East about 6-7 years ago. I'm telling you right now, who won the game? No, I'm spacing off who won the game. Was it Syracuse?
Syracuse?
Whoever won the game, the bottom line was everybody was like, okay, we're going against the team that won the next day in the championship game of the Big East because they played 6 overtimes last night. And I remember talking, it might have been Al McBourty. I'm like talking to him at night, and I'm going, everybody's on the other side. Yeah. And I go, do you know if that team loses, the books are going to have to close their doors in Vegas because so many people are. I go, watch them. They're going to come out and they're going to be just fine.
Yeah, you know
it's
why?
that adrenaline of the youth.
It's not just that. I mean, look, and I was never a star athlete, okay? And I know that's going to come as a shock to you. But I can tell you this. When I was 20 years old, I had no problem pulling an all-nighter, taking a nap, and being ready to go the next day. Just when you're 20, you've got boundless energy. Listen, let's say that we can perform at a very high level for an extended period of time. How tough is it to play a basketball game? Okay, I mean, no, if you're 40, that's something else entirely. I think people forget that.
Speak for yourself.
Seriously,
I'm just kidding.
I'm actually not joking with this. For 20-year-olds to walk in the park, you just don't need that. And I think
I'll tell you what we did back in the day. In the 20s, we used to start drinking at 4 o'clock at night, get done at 7 o'clock in the morning, and be at the over 20 league in baseball in Las Vegas at 9 a.m. 2 hours after you just pulled a 16-hour out all night drinking binge on the strip in Las Vegas, and you went out and you did a Babe Ruth. You know, and it's like nowadays I can't even eat a Baby Ruth and go out and play.
And the thing of it is, we're talking about guys like us. We're not fine-tuned athletes. These guys are in great shape. You think that that is the most overrated factor in handicapping college sports is, boy, they're going to be tired. No, they're not.
Well, having said that, if Kansas, who's relied more on the three, is able to get their threes and is not turned over as far as turning over the basketball in this game, they're going to win the game outright. I'm just going to say that right now. If they're shooting 40% of their shots from area code 3, they hit 40% or whatever like they've done all year, more dependent on the 3 than ever before. You've got to turn this basketball team over. And we talked about this on radio, too, in the last couple of weeks, where that if you look at their couple of the regular season losses, like 3 of their losses, it's 15, 16, 17, 18 turnovers for Kansas. If you don't force them to turn the ball over then more than 11 or 12 times, you're probably not going to beat them. If you do beat them, it ain't going to be by margin. It's going to be a real close, tight game. And that's the key, I think, for Nova, Marco, is not only do they have to hit their threes, they can't go in the tank like they did against Texas Tech, but you got to maybe make Kansas earn bringing the ball up the basketball court every once in a while. A lot of teams haven't done that so far in the Big Dance.
They haven't. One edge that we talked about with Kansas and Duke, the rebounding edge that they had against Duke, I don't see them having that kind of rebounding edge against Villanova. So they're not going to get those second shots there. And I'm just looking at this Villanova team, and obviously you can't compare Alabama, West Virginia, and Texas Tech to Kansas. But, man, they put the clamps down on Alabama and Texas Tech. West Virginia, that game was, never really
– It was a close game with a minute to go. I mean, like 5-point game there, too, wasn't it?
But they kick – again, they have these close games, and all of a sudden it's 12 because they're going to extend the lead at the end of the game if you're fouling them. Not like what we're worried about in the Michigan game. You're going to get it there. I just think it comes down to how many threes can Kansas do? Now, if you look and say – hey, they handled the Duke zone. They should be able to, handle this Villanova team. On paper, I can agree with that. I just think that we haven't seen the complete game from Villanova yet, and they've managed to just roll.
Don't tell that to Texas Tech. But I agree.
Yeah, no, I mean, they had their worst game of the tournament, and the final margin was 12. Yeah. That's the part that scares me about Villanova in this one.
They can pull away at the end with free throws. That's no doubt about it. Kansas allows only 32% shooting from the three-point line. Villanova takes half of their shots, over 49% of their shots from the three-point line. If Villanova's canning them, they probably win this game and maybe can pull away at the end. If Kansas is able to clamp down a little bit, not get Graham in foul trouble, Azubuike, those guys, then Kansas comes away with at least a cover. It's going to be a great Final Four. Let's take a quick timeout, guys. When we come back, we're going to jump to the NBA. Golden State is now plus money. They're still the favorite, but plus money to win the NBA title. We'll find out from Aaron Bruski if there's any value on Golden State. We'll throw out a couple of the dark horses also to Aaron and let him tackle that subject. He's at the Pacers-Sacramento Kings game tonight. He's working a little bit, but he's going to give us some time, and we'll talk about that and more to come with Aaron. And don't forget Best Bets still to come. Stick around.
It's Manic Monday, and that means every pick at WagerTalk.com is just $9. Get a play in any sport valued at up to $30 for just $9 each and every Monday at WagerTalk.com.
Welcome back to Wager Talk. Best bets still to come. Golden State Warriors, guys, they've seen their odds to win the NBA title go from minus money to plus money for the first time this season. Recent injuries, especially to Steph Curry, have some believing the Warriors are not the shoo-in that a lot of people once thought they were. And here to give us the goods and his thoughts, Aaron Bruski, a good friend of ours. You can follow Aaron at Aaron Bruski on Twitter. He's at the Pacers-Sacramento Kings game tonight. Of course, does a lot of writing and following of the Sacramento Kings. Good enough, though, to be able to get him on the show for a few minutes. And, Aaron, we spoke about a month ago. The Warriors were still the clear-cut minus money favorite at the books. So much so that no one was betting the Warriors because of the expensive price, and the books were telling us they were rooting for the Warriors for what they needed to have done behind the counter. Not quite the case today. Still the favorite, but as I mentioned, plus money in some books to do so. You've got Clay, KD, Draymond, Steph, all injured. Any one of those particular, though, concern you once we get to the postseason?
You know, I think Steph actually might be the concerning one because he has always had Chris Paul's number, and that really is the formidable part of the Houston Rockets attack, is you've got two All-NBA point guards, James Harden, Chris Paul. Steph makes Chris Paul look silly pretty regularly, and I think that neutralizes Paul, and that's kind of a checkmate scenario for the Warriors. Still, that said, you know, the Rockets have not been that deep, and I don't know that they have the firepower even if one of those four players goes down. Maybe Draymond, if he was to go down, since he's such a big piece of their defense and their identity of their team. But I like the plus money. I mean, I think you're talking about one of the best teams in NBA history against a Rockets squad that hasn't proven anything.
Yeah, I think at this point now there's almost value on the Golden State Warriors at plus $1.20, plus $1.10. Chief competition in the West, of course, the Houston Rockets, second favorite to win the title. But, you know, I have some who are anti-Golden State who want to see a Warriors-Jazz first-round clash. And when you include the Clippers and the Nuggets right now, there are 6 teams that are just 3 games apart fighting for those Final Four playoff spots out West. Is there a dark horse, Aaron, that, you know, among, let's say, the Jazz, the T-Wolves, the Spurs, the Pelicans, the Clippers, who you think has a legit shot to pull a major first-round upset?
You know, I think your friend has a great point wanting to see the Jazz, just to see Rudy Gobert and what he can do with some of those other players as well. But I don't think they would have a chance. The one I would be looking at is San Antonio. Of course, we got to figure out, is Kawhi Leonard ever going to play?
Right.
Manu Ginobili doesn't think so. But that is the team with the pedigree, the system, the familiarity. They don't have the firepower, but we've watched them, you know, I guess as recently as last year, as long as Zaza Pachulia doesn't slide underneath Kawhi Leonard, they're up by 20 points in game 1. But they do have Kawhi Leonard. It's really, I mean, you talk to people close to the organization, and they say he looks pretty good. He needs 5 games, though, to be able to actually beat Kawhi Leonard, 5 games in the regular season, I would think. So that's up in the air. I don't know that I would put any money on it right now.
Hey, Aaron, I want to stay on the Spurs for a moment. Is this going to be the end for Greg Popovich? I mean, the window's closing, and Kawhi Leonard apparently doesn't want to be there anymore. Or maybe, you know, who knows what the story is there. Is there a possibility he calls it a day after this season?
I think if Kawhi was to exit stage left somehow, I don't think that's going to happen. So I think you see Greg Popovich no matter what for at least another year. This thing with Kawhi, I think, really kind of comes down to a personal preference of not wanting to push through this injury. People around him sort of supporting him in that regard. Haven't seen something like this in a very long time. But the Spurs are going to make that max offer as long as they don't have proof that he is not Kawhi Leonard. And as of right now, they don't have that proof. In fact, they've got the opposite of that proof. So Kawhi's going to have to turn down a lot of money to play for somebody else. And I just don't see that happening right now.
Thinking again about how the teams do in the postseason, Utah, big, physical, they can block shots, they pound you, they muck things up. I mean, who wants to face, as you just mentioned, Rudy Gobert in a series? So you might get past the Jazz, and if you're Utah or Houston, you probably, Golden State or Houston, you probably do. But they might soften you up a touch for the next round. But also, Aaron, what about the T-Wolves? I mean, I love the offseason move to get Jimmy Butler. I mean, that was kind of a steal in my opinion. What's the difference between Minnesota, let's say, winning a game or two against Golden State and upsetting the Warriors in the first round, and, of course, no Steph Curry in the first round?
Minnesota is one of those really interesting teams right now. I don't want to say they're having a war in the locker room, but they're not thrilled with Tom Thibodeau. What he's doing with minutes, they're openly calling him out, asking for more bench minutes. Jimmy Butler is racing to get back. They're just a team that's on edge right now, losing games that they need to win. But at the same time, Cat went for like 56 points the other night. They haven't really unleashed him. They have a lot of firepower in the bottom of the West. I don't think you want to play any of those teams except for the Pelicans. And the Pelicans would be one of those teams you didn't want to play if they still had DeMarcus Cousins. So I think that you're right. Whichever team softens up the Warriors, that could lead to a scenario where Houston gets by them. And you mentioned the Jazz. They got a lot of gamers on that squad. Donovan Mitchell's a future MVP candidate. Joe Ingles is savvy and is as much of a, not dirty, but borderline dirty player you're going to find in the league. They're going to give each of these teams, I would say, if you're betting against the spread, I think a lot of them are going to do very well.
Just a quick question to wrap up the West. I mean, obviously you love Butler, you love Jeff Teague, Andrew Wiggins, members of the Minnesota T-Wolves. But if you rate Kevin Durant a 5, being 5 being best on a scale of 1 to 5, what do you rate Karl Anthony Towns? How much is a true difference between these two players? I think Karl Anthony Towns is a little underrated.
He's underrated, but I think a lot of that comes from the fact that he hasn't really been given the green light in Minnesota. They don't force the action to him as much as they should. He plays within a defensive system that I don't know that he's really comfortable with. Him and Tibbs don't see eye to eye on a lot of stuff with regard to chasing down blocks. I think he's not yet really blossomed into the player that he can be, and that's, I think, what makes him underrated. And at the same time, some of Tibbs' complaints about his defense, they hold true. He's not instinctually where he needs to be, and some of the toughness that, Tom Thibodeau can look right next door to Taj Gibson and say, be like that guy. He's not there yet. So I think there's a little bit of truth that he's underrated, but at the same time, if a team's going to beat Minnesota, that you might find them camping out in the lane and taking advantage of Karl Anthony Towns.
Aaron, Marco here. Switching over to the Eastern Conference, we've got 3 teams that are fighting for the last 2 home court spots. You got Philadelphia, Philly, Cleveland, and Indiana. Who do you think is going to be the odd man out of those 3? And the second part of that question, really want to get your opinion on Philadelphia. This is a team that, although they're suffered an injury right now with Embiid, going to be out 2 to 4 weeks. What do you think of this team? Because we love seeing a team that's peaking at the right time. And, boy, is this team peaking right now. 8 straight wins. In 7 of those 8 games, they've topped 118 or more points. They're clicking on all cylinders right now. But how much of a problem is this injury going to be moving forward?
Look, if I want to just put down some money on a lottery ticket, I had somebody tell me that Philly had no chance the other day, and I wanted to just laugh in their face because the East is so wide open. And Philly, to your point, is playing so well. I even thought that Markelle Fultz coming back was a bad idea, and he went out there and he played pretty well the other day, though I would probably sell that a little bit. One thing in the short term for your bettors, Rashawn Holmes is a beast. So that injured star theory and the line that's going to move because Joel Embiid's out for however many weeks right now, Rashawn Holmes has been champing at the bit for minutes, and that guy can play. He is an amazing defensive player, and he's good offensively, too. He's just been kind of a casualty of the numbers there, and Amir Johnson's obviously going to play a big role, but Rashawn Holmes is going to get let loose. I would take them just however many games they have left. I think it's 8 or 9. I would just ride Philly the rest of the way. As far as them being able to win the East, I mean, obviously they got to get through LeBron, but that team is extremely flawed. Toronto is a favorite, in my opinion. Just Joel Embiid in a playoff series with what he's capable of doing on the block. He can control tempo. You have so many different athletes, so many different places. You know they've never done it before. It's highly unlikely that they pull it off. But if I want to get, I don't know what they're at right now. A while back, I looked at 16-1 odds. I think they're probably going to be, 20, 25-1 once the Joel Embiid injury stuff hits. I would be all over that.
Do you think Cleveland, just when we buy in, they win 3 or 4 in a row, we think, okay, Love's back. They're going to, get it together for the playoffs. They're turning the switch, and then they have that ugly performance the other night in Miami. I just don't know. I don't have any faith in this Cleveland team. Am I right? Or do you think that once they get to the playoffs, we'll see the LeBron and the rest of the team that we expect?
I think this team is going to perfectly defer to LeBron, and it's not going to be enough. I feel like LeBron is probably going to give it his all. We've seen him sort of lay off at the end of playoff series when he's on his way out of town. But I do think in this case, because it's Cleveland, because a lot of people are expecting him to do that, I think he's going to play through until the end. I just have zero faith in these role players. Rodney Hood, I don't know that he's really been exposed to playoff basketball. George Hill's been a mess here in Sacramento. And in Cleveland, there's a guy that defers by nature, and they're asking him to defer. I don't think they're going to get a lot of support out of him. Kyle Korver's been missing time. All the way down the list, Kevin Love will be without a rhythm, I think, heading into the playoffs. Tristan Thompson, you name it. I just cannot buy those guys to advance. I think Toronto's a team.
Good stuff from Aaron Bruski. Aaron, we're going to let you get away. We know you're working tonight, covering the Pacers and the Sacramento Kings up in Sacramento. We always appreciate your time, sir. Follow Aaron Bruski at Aaron Bruski on Twitter, and check out a couple of more Twitter sites that he has out there, all on that Aaron Bruski page that you'll be able to follow and get great daily up-to-date information on. Aaron, have a great night tonight, and we'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Great talking with you guys.
Take care, Aaron. All right, when we come back, we're going to get to best bets. Stick around. We are Wager Talk.
Every Tuesday, WagerTalk.com offers a best bet selection from its hottest handicapper. It's a great way to introduce yourself to WagerTalk.com with a big best bet winner for just $2 on $2 Tuesday.
Welcome back to Wager Talk Final Four version, and we're talking best bets. We'll start with the man under the hat. He is Dave Cokin. And Dave, what are you looking at for a best bet on the show today?
I'm going to go to the Friday night. I don't know if it's CBI or CIT. It doesn't matter. It's one of the smaller. One of the smaller tournaments.
Sure.
And Northern Colorado is at home to Illinois Chicago, and there are a few factors that point to Northern Colorado here. One is that since February 1st, they've lost 3 games. 2 of them were in overtime. One at Weber State. The other was in the tournament, the Big Sky tournament to Montana, which was the eventual winner. And the other one was in the last regular season game, which didn't mean anything. It was a 0 game for them, and they lost to Sacramento State. I mean, they're playing really good ball, especially for a Big Sky team. I mean, they're just playing at a level that Big Sky teams don't play at. They're at home again. They're facing a UIC team that, again, Dikembe Dixon done for the year for them. You've mentioned this a few times when we've talked about it on the radio show, Scott. Their assist-to-turnover ratio on the road is really not good at all. And it wasn't good the other night, even though they beat Liberty. They still had more turnovers than assists. They play a fast pace, which plays right into the strength of Northern Colorado, which loves to get up and down the court. The altitude could be a factor here with this being 3rd straight road game for UIC and the 2nd road game in 3 days with a lot of travel involved. I think there's too many negatives on the Illinois-Chicago side. A red-hot Bears team here. -9 is not a cheap price, but I think it's low enough to justify playing the favorite. This is a play I'm on. It's not an extra opinion or anything like that. I'm taking Northern Colorado -9.
Marco D'Angelo, what you looking at for our best bet of the podcast today?
I'm going to go with a Friday night NBA game, and I'm looking at the Clippers as they travel to Portland, and I'm going to be looking at the total here. We're looking at 217.5. These two teams just played a couple weeks ago, March 18th, back in L.A., and it was a high-scoring game, 122-109. I'm looking for a reversal for a couple reasons here. One, when those two met back then on the 18th, both teams were playing their 3rd game in 4 nights. That's always a disadvantage. I've always felt that tired teams don't play defense, so you don't have that intensity. Plus the fact Portland had played the very night before. Now this time around, both teams are playing their 3rd game in 4 nights again, but neither team played last night, so they're going to have that full day's rest.
Sure. And
we're going to have a playoff atmosphere with this game, and the reason for that is Portland's in the playoffs, no problem for them, but they are fighting to hold on to the number 3 seed. They got a 2-game lead over Oklahoma City, and you want to stay in that 3 spot rather than the 4 spot. obviously you want to avoid playing the two big powerhouses as long as you can in the West. And then for the Clippers on the other side of the coin, they're fighting for their playoff lives. They're one game out of the playoffs right now, sitting in the 9th seed, trying to grab that last spot for the playoffs. So they definitely need it. So with that said, you got two teams that have a reason to win. They're both rested. You got Portland coming off an ugly loss in their last game. It was a back-to-back game, so give them a little bit of credit there that, maybe playing the back-to-back nights, but they shouldn't have lost to who they lost to, one of the tanking teams, surprised them, Memphis, with a win the other night. So I look for a big effort out of them. And on the Clippers side, we've seen them play some better defense the last couple games. Sure. They've held back-to-back opponents to under 100 points. So I think we're getting some line value here because of that first meeting, or the last meeting, I should say. I'll take under 217.5.
You can follow Marco at Marco in Vegas. Follow Dave at Dave Cokin. I'm at Scott Wins, and I'm going to go with the Friday night game also. I'll go with that other tournament, CBI, and that will be North Texas and San Francisco, the deciding game in the CBI tournament. And if you remember, North Texas lost the first meeting. That was in San Francisco, 72-62. It was a horrible first half for North Texas. There was a 22-2 run in the mix for San Francisco in that game. They made 14 of 33 three-pointers, which is equivalent to, 21 for 33 if you shot inside the three-point line. And North Texas just couldn't shoot the basketball. 4 for 21 from the three-point line. That's under 20%. They only made 27 of 69 overall. Only 8 assists. I mean, check out San Francisco in that first game, 20 assists. And that 72-62 win, that's a heck of a lot of assists for 72 points. They did a great job. Only turned the ball over 10 times, but they go to North Texas. Things start to turn around a little bit where North Texas has been outstanding all year shooting the basketball. The thing is that North Texas didn't even shoot all that well or at their regular rate at home and still were able to get the win and the cover in Game 2. I would suspect that after a couple of so-so shooting games, especially one at home, now that they're back home for the second time in 3 nights, they're able to shoot the basketball more like they have throughout the course of the entire season, and they get the win and the cover, laying 4.5 in this one. So North Texas, which bounced back with a 14-point, 69-55 win in Game 2. I think they find a way to win this one by about 8 to 10 points. So got college and pro action for Friday. Dave says to take Northern Colorado minus the points. I'll take North Texas minus the points, and Marco's going to say take the under between the Blazers and the Clippers. Good stuff, guys. Have a great Final Four to everybody out there. Put your Final Four in the win column for Dave Cokin, for Marco D'Angelo, for our producer Mark Seidel, and Aaron Bruski. I'm Scott Spreitzer. Put them in the win column. We'll talk to you soon.
And I bid you good night. Good night. Good night.
I'll catch you on the flip side.